The boardroom door closed, and my father took my seat. Not metaphorically, not symbolically. He sat down, adjusted the microphone, and smiled like the room belonged to him. For a half second, no one spoke. 12 directors, 2 bankers, my general counsel frozen mid-note. The skyline of Austin, Texas, reflected in the glass behind them, clean and expensive. My nameplate still rested in front of the chair he'd just claimed. I was 32 years old. I was the CEO, and my parents had just decided I wasn't needed anymore. If you've ever had your own family move against you when the money got real, hit like, subscribe, or leave a comment before we go any further. What happened next only makes sense if you've lived it. My name is Elena Cruz. I founded Heliox Systems 9 years earlier in a rented garage south of Congress Avenue. By the time of that meeting, Heliox was valued at just over $1 billion, with enterprise contracts across energy, logistics, and municipal infrastructure. We were weeks away from finalizing a strategic control agreement that would change the company forever. That meeting was supposed to be routine. It wasn't. My father, Miguel Cruz, cleared his throat. "Let's begin," he said, voice calm, practiced. "We don't want to waste anyone's time." I stayed standing. "Get out of my chair," I said. He didn't look at me. My mother, Rosa Delgado, sat beside him, hands folded, eyes down. My older brother, Daniel Cruz, leaned against the wall near the window, arms crossed, watching me like I was a problem he'd already solved. "Elena," Rosa said softly, finally looking up. "Sit down. You're making this harder than it needs to be." That sentence had shaped my childhood. I didn't sit. "This is a closed executive session," I said. "You're not authorized to." Miguel lifted a folder. Thick. Labeled. Familiar. "We are," he said. "As of this morning." My general counsel, Priya Nandakumar, stood. "Mr. Cruz, with respect, no change in executive authority has been filed with the Secretary of State." Miguel smiled again. "It has. You'll receive the document shortly." That was the moment my chest went cold. Because Miguel never bluffed. He prepared. I finally sat, not in my chair, but beside it. The room smelled faintly of espresso and leather. Everyone avoided my eyes. This wasn't a coup born of emotion. This was premeditated. 30 minutes later, the meeting ended with no vote, no resolution, and a promise of follow-up documentation. Miguel stood first. Daniel followed him out without a word. Rosa lingered just long enough to touch my arm. "We're doing this for your own good," she whispered. Then she left too. That's how it started. Not with shouting, not with tears. With my nameplate still on the table, and someone else acting like it was ceremonial. I built Heliox without them. But they had been waiting for the moment it was too big to ignore. Growing up, I was the quiet one. Daniel was the heir apparent, the son, the one my father trained to speak before rooms like this. I learned to work instead, to build, to execute. When Heliox was nothing but prototypes and burn rate, Miguel dismissed it as a phase. Rosa asked when I'd find something stable. Daniel laughed and told me to let him know when I needed a real job. They only showed interest after our Series C closed at $420 million. That's when Miguel asked for a board seat. Rosa suggested restructuring ownership to protect the family. Daniel suddenly wanted to help scale. I said no. They waited. And now, here we were. An hour after the meeting, Priya came to my office and shut the door. "They filed a shareholder consent action," she said. "Your parents and Daniel pooled their shares with 2 early investors who sold quietly last quarter." I stared at her. "That's impossible. Those shares were locked." "They weren't," she replied. "Not the way the operating agreement was written." I closed my eyes. "How much control?" I asked. Priya hesitated. "Enough to force a vote. Enough to suspend you pending review." Pending review. Corporate language for removal without firing. By evening, my inbox was full. Calendar holds canceled. Bankers asking to reschedule. A message from Northridge Capital requesting clarification on leadership continuity. That's when Daniel finally called. "You should have listened," he said, voice smug, controlled. "This didn't have to get ugly." "You planned this," I said. "Don't be dramatic," he replied. You were never meant to hold something this big alone. There it was. Not incapable, not reckless. Unentitled. You built a company, Daniel continued. We're making it legitimate. You're stealing it, I said. Silence. Then, a laugh. Relax, he said. You'll still be taken care of. Taken care of. Another family phrase. It meant sidelined with a check. I hung up. That night, I sat alone in my apartment overlooking Lady Bird Lake, lights reflecting off the water like broken glass. I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I reviewed capitalization tables, voting thresholds, side letters I'd insisted on years ago that everyone said were unnecessary. One clause caught my eye. Buried. Overlooked. My phone buzzed. A text from Miguel. We need to talk. Tomorrow. As a family. I typed back one line. Number. As shareholders. Then I opened my laptop and drafted an email to someone I hadn't spoken to in 5 years. Lauren Weiss, forensic corporate attorney, New York. Subject. Urgent. Hostile control attempt. I hit send. Because the smallest mistake my family made wasn't underestimating my emotions. It was underestimating my preparation. They thought I'd freeze. They thought I'd fold. They thought blood meant leverage. They forgot who taught this company to survive. When the room went silent. And this time, I wasn't losing my seat quietly. By morning, the narrative had already started forming without me. I woke up to 3 missed calls from Northridge Capital, one from Bainwell Advisory, and a calendar invite titled Leadership Alignment Check. The invite came from my own assistant, Marissa Cole, who hadn't sent it voluntarily. I could tell by the wording. Too careful, too neutral. I showered, dressed, and drank coffee without tasting it. Routine mattered. It kept me from reacting. At 8:12 a.m., the first email hit. From Miguel Cruz. Subject. Temporary governance adjustment. The language was clean. Sanitized. He framed the takeover as a pause, a safeguard, a moment to protect Heliox from founder tunnel vision ahead of a transformational liquidity event. I read it once. Then again. There it was. The real motive. They weren't trying to run the company. They were trying to sell it. At 9 a.m., I walked into headquarters like nothing had changed. Same security badge, same nods, same elevator music. But the floor felt different under my feet, like a building after a quiet earthquake. Marissa stood when she saw me. Her eyes flicked toward the glass conference room down the hall. They're in there, she said softly. Who? I asked. She swallowed. Your parents, Daniel, and 2 consultants. Consultants. Always the signal that decisions had already been made. I nodded. Cancel the alignment check. She hesitated. They told me not to. I looked at her. I'm still CEO. She exhaled and nodded. Inside the conference room, Daniel Cruz was already talking. Founder risk is a real concern at this scale, he was saying, pacing like he belonged there. Investors want predictability. Miguel sat at the head of the table again, Rosa beside him. 2 men I didn't recognize took notes. One wore a Keller Bain lapel pin. I stepped in. Predictability doesn't come from replacing leadership without cause, I said. It comes from competence. Daniel turned slowly, smiling. You're late. I wasn't invited, I replied. That's different. Miguel gestured toward a chair that wasn't mine. Sit. No, I said. This is my company. One of the consultants, Thomas Reed, cleared his throat. Ms. Cruz, with respect, the shareholder action grants. Ms. Cruz doesn't work for you, I cut in. You work for Heliox, and I haven't authorized your presence. The room went still. That was my first mistake, because I underestimated how far they were willing to go. Miguel slid a document across the table. You're being placed on administrative leave pending review, he said. Effective immediately. I didn't touch it. By whom? I asked. By the board, Daniel said. The board hasn't met, I replied. And you're not chair. Miguel leaned back. We are now, Rosa finally spoke. Elena, please. You're making this confrontational. I looked at her. You planned this in secret. What did you think it would be? Her eyes flickered. Guilt, maybe, or calculation. I turned to Thomas Reed. You represent Keller Bain? Yes, he said. Then you should know Heliox has a poison pill provision triggered by hostile control actions, I said. Did they disclose that? Thomas hesitated. Daniel's smile thinned. That clause had been my insurance. One line, one condition. Triggered if voting power consolidated without founder consent during pre-acquisition negotiations. It wasn't public. It was buried in an appendix everyone told me was paranoid. Miguel's jaw tightened. That clause is unenforceable. No, I said calmly. It's inconvenient. The meeting dissolved after that. Not explosively, just abruptly. People gathered their things, avoided eye contact. Rosa touched my arm again. We're still your family, she said. I stepped back. Family doesn't ambush. By noon, my access to internal dashboards was restricted. By 2 p.m., my calendar was empty. By 3:30, Marissa was crying in the bathroom. They told me I report to Daniel now, she said. I'm so sorry. You did nothing wrong, I replied. That night, I finally heard back from Lauren Weiss. Her email was short. I'm in. Don't move, don't respond. Forward everything. At 10:17 p.m., Daniel sent a group text. We're announcing leadership transition tomorrow morning. Please don't complicate this. I stared at the message. Then I forwarded it to Lauren. She replied within 60 seconds. Good. That helped. I slept 4 hours. Enough. The next morning, Heliox issued a press release. Founder Elena Cruz steps aside as board implements strategic leadership review. Steps aside. By 9 a.m., my phone was blowing up. Reporters, investors, founders I barely knew offering advice, sympathy, curiosity. At 9:32, Northridge Capital requested an emergency call. Lauren joined me on speaker. This action triggers material misrepresentation risk, she said calmly after introductions, and potentially breaches fiduciary duty. Miguel's voice came through sharp. This is internal family business. Lauren didn't miss a beat. No, this is securities law. Silence. At 11 a.m., my badge stopped working. Security hesitated, then apologized. I walked back to my car without looking back. On the drive home, Rosa called. Please don't do this, she said. Daniel needs this. I pulled over. Why? I asked. She paused. Because he's always needed help. I closed my eyes. And I didn't? I asked. She had no answer. That afternoon, Lauren called with the update that changed everything. They filed the consent action in Delaware, she said, but Heliox is incorporated in Nevada. I laughed once. Short, sharp. They filed in the wrong jurisdiction, I said. Yes, Lauren replied, which means their authority is questionable. And the poison pill? I asked. She paused. It's valid. And it's armed. I leaned back, heart steady. Then let it click, I said. Because now, they weren't just stealing my company. They were exposing themselves. And the next move wouldn't be emotional. It would be surgical. The first thing to break was Daniel's confidence. It didn't shatter. It thinned. You could hear it in his voice by the end of the week, stretched tight by questions he didn't know how to answer. On Thursday morning, Lauren Weiss flew in from New York. We met in a private conference room at a neutral law office downtown, the kind with soundproof walls and no company logos. She was precise, unsentimental, and already 10 steps ahead of where my family thought they were. They assumed optics would carry this, Lauren said, flipping open her laptop. Press release, family unity language, temporary review framing. She looked at me. But they didn't shut the right doors. What doors? I asked. The ones you built, she replied. We walked through it, piece by piece. Daniel and my parents had pooled just enough voting power to suspend me internally, but they hadn't secured lender consent. They hadn't disclosed the poison pill. And worst of all, they'd moved fast enough to make mistakes. They're trying to force a sale before diligence catches up, Lauren said. Northridge knows it. Bainwell knows it. That's why the call started. By noon, Northridge Capital formally requested clarification on founder authority. Lauren drafted the response. Factual, clean, deadly. At 2:17 p.m., Heliox's CFO, Aaron Feld, called me directly. They're asking me to sign off on revised projections, he said quietly. Daniel wants to front the investor call tomorrow. And? I asked. Aaron hesitated. He doesn't understand the assumptions. He keeps asking me to simplify. That was Daniel. He loved control, not complexity. Don't sign anything, I said, and document every request. I already am. Aaron replied. That night, my mother came to my apartment unannounced. Rosa Delgado stood in the doorway, holding a container of food like a peace offering. She looked tired, but composed. Controlled. Always controlled. I made soup, she said. I stepped aside and let her in. She set the container down, then turned to face me. You could end this, she said softly. Just agree to step back. Let Daniel lead. I leaned against the counter. Why? I asked. Because this company is too big to gamble with, she said. You mean too big for me, I replied. She flinched. Daniel has support, she continued. He has advisors. Your father has never run Heliox, I cut in. Neither has Daniel. Neither have you. Rose's jaw tightened. You don't understand how this looks. I do, I said. A woman who built something being told she's a risk when it stops being theoretical. She opened her mouth. Closed it. They told me you'd calm down, she said finally. That you'd realize this is for the best. I nodded slowly. They taught me something else, I said. How to prepare quietly. She left without taking the soup. The next morning, Daniel hosted his investor call. Lauren and I listened in. Daniel spoke confidently for the first 5 minutes. Vision, growth, stability. Then the question started. What triggered the founder review? Has Elena Cruz agreed to this transition? How does this affect pre-signing covenants? Daniel deflected, reframed, smiled, until Northridge's managing partner, Jonathan Hale, spoke. We've reviewed the governance filings, Hale said, and there appear to be discrepancies. Silence. Specifically, Hale continued, we see consolidation of voting power during an active acquisition window. That raises concerns. Daniel cleared his throat. Our legal team has confirmed. Lauren muted the call and looked at me. He's lying. Hale wasn't finished. We also received notice, he said, that a founder protective clause may have been triggered. Daniel froze. I'm not aware of, he began. Hale interrupted. Then perhaps you should be. The call ended 5 minutes later. By afternoon, Heliox's internal Slack channels were buzzing. Quiet panic. Confusion. People asking who was really in charge. Daniel called me at 6:03 p.m. You're undermining us, he said. No, I replied. I'm letting them see you. You think this is clever? He snapped. Dragging family into court? You dragged family into my boardroom, I said. This is just the follow-through. That night, Lauren sent the formal notice to Heliox's board and all major investors. Subject: Founder authority and triggered protective provisions. Attached were documents, dates, signatures, and one line that mattered most. Pursuant to Section 9.4, any attempt to alter executive authority without founder consent during active acquisition discussions renders all voting consolidations null. At 11:42 p.m., Miguel texted, We need to meet. Now. I didn't respond, because at midnight, the poison pill executed automatically. Every pooled voting share reverted. Daniel's control evaporated. My parents' leverage banished. By morning, the board had no choice. An emergency meeting was scheduled. This time, my name was back on the agenda, and Daniel finally understood what he'd underestimated. Not my anger, my timing. The emergency board meeting was set for 7:30 a.m., early enough to catch people before they could coordinate stories. Late enough to let the consequences settle overnight. I arrived first. Same boardroom, same skyline. My chair back where it belonged. The nameplate hadn't moved. Someone had tried to slide it aside, then thought better of it. That detail mattered. Directors trickled in quietly. No small talk. No coffee jokes. When Priya Nandakumar, my general counsel, entered, she gave me a look that said the documents had done their work. At 7:32, Miguel Cruz walked in. He stopped when he saw me seated. For the first time since this began, he hesitated. Daniel followed, jaw clenched, eyes darting. He didn't look at me. Rosa Delgado came last, her posture stiff, lips pressed thin. She chose a seat far from the head of the table. That was new, too. The board chair, Elliot Marsh, cleared his throat. This meeting is called to address governance irregularities and executive authority. He looked directly at me. Miss Cruz, as founder and CEO, you have the floor. I stood slowly, no speeches, no drama. Yesterday at midnight, I said, a founder protective provision executed as designed. Any authority assumed through consolidated voting during acquisition discussions is null. I slid a printed copy of the provision down the table. The attempted suspension of my role was invalid. Silence. Elliot turned to Miguel. Mr. Cruz? Miguel adjusted his cufflinks. His voice was controlled, but thinner now. We acted in good faith to protect shareholder value. I looked at him. You acted to force a sale. Daniel scoffed. That's not. Elliot raised a hand. Daniel, you're not recognized. That landed harder than any insult. Elliot turned back to Miguel. Were you aware of the clause? Miguel paused. Too long. I was informed it was unlikely to apply, he said. Lauren Weiss spoke for the first time. Calm. Flat. The clause applied precisely because of how quickly you moved, she said. And because you moved without disclosure. She slid forward a timeline. Dates, emails, capital shifts. Additionally, Lauren continued, the shareholder consent action was filed in an incorrect jurisdiction, which further undermines its validity. The board absorbed that quietly. Rosa finally spoke. We are her parents. I met her eyes. That's not a governance role, I said. Elliot exhaled slowly. At this point, the board recognizes Elena Cruz as CEO with full authority restored. A vote followed. Unanimous. Daniel stared at the table. Miguel didn't move. The meeting ended without ceremony. Directors filed out quickly, avoiding conversation. When the room cleared, my father remained seated. Elena, he said, sit. I didn't. You miscalculated, I said. Not the law. Me. He stood, finally meeting my eyes. You built something valuable, but you don't understand scale. Exit timing. Legacy. There it is, I said. You didn't want to help. You wanted credit. Daniel exploded. You think this makes you invincible? No, I replied calmly. It makes me informed. Rosa stood and walked toward me. We gave you everything, she said. Education, stability, support. You gave me expectations, I replied, and took credit when I exceeded them. Her eyes filled, but she didn't cry. You could have shared this, she said. I tried, I said, when it was small, when it was inconvenient. You weren't interested. Miguel's voice dropped. This isn't over. I nodded. I know, because I could see it now. This wasn't just about Heliox. It was about what came next. By noon, investor confidence stabilized. Northridge issued a clarification. Bainwell followed. The acquisition paused, but didn't collapse. Heliox stock ticked upward. Daniel's authority evaporated overnight. But something else surfaced by evening. Priya came to my office and shut the door. There's a problem, she said. What kind? I asked. She hesitated. Your parents pledged personal shares as collateral for a bridge loan. I looked up. When? I asked. Last quarter, she said, using projected sale proceeds. That meant one thing. If the sale didn't happen, they were exposed. How much? I asked. $280 million, she said. I leaned back, processing. That's not my problem, I said. No, Priya agreed. But they might try to make it. That night, Daniel texted, you could still stop this. Agree to the sale. Everyone wins. I stared at the message, then replied, not everyone. I slept deeply for the first time in weeks, because I finally understood the shape of this fight. They hadn't just tried to take my company. They'd gambled their future on the assumption that I would cave. And now, the leverage had reversed. The next move wouldn't be loud. It would be irrevocable. Leverage reveals itself slowly. It doesn't arrive with threats. It arrives with requests, framed as concern, meetings framed as reconciliation, and urgency framed as responsibility. By Monday morning, my calendar was full again. Not with investor calls, but with family. My father, Miguel Cruz, asked for lunch. My mother, Rosa Delgado, asked to just talk. My brother, Daniel Cruz, didn't ask at all. He sent documents. A revised term sheet. Annotated. Highlighted. I didn't open it. At Heliox, stability returned on the surface. Engineers shipped. Sales closed. Operations moved forward. But beneath that, the air had changed. People watched more closely, listened more carefully. Authority, once questioned, now had edges again. Lauren Weiss came by my office late afternoon. They're exposed, she said without preamble. And they know it. Which one? I asked. All of them, she replied. But Daniel most. She laid out the timeline. The bridge loan my parents had guaranteed personally had covenants tied to a liquidity event. If Heliox didn't sell within 9 months, the rate spiked. If it didn't sell within 12, collateral conversion kicked in. They bet on a sale, Lauren said. They bet on you stepping aside. I nodded. They always do. That evening, Daniel showed up at headquarters. Security called first. He says it's urgent, the guard said. Family matter. Let him up, I said. Daniel walked into my office without knocking. Tie loosened, confidence forced. He looked around like he was checking if anything had changed. You're enjoying this, he said. No, I replied. I'm finishing it. He sat, without being invited. You're burning everything, he said. For what? Control? For accuracy, I said. He leaned forward. You could still save them. I waited. Agree to the sale, Daniel continued. We walk away clean. You get your number, they get relief. I get... Stop, I said. He froze. You don't get anything, I continued. Not from me. You owe them, he snapped. They're your parents. They made choices, I said. So did you. His voice dropped. They'll lose everything. I studied him. They risked everything, I corrected. On my silence, he stood abruptly. You think you're better than us now? No, I said calmly. I think I'm done absorbing your risk. He left without another word. The next move came through legal channels. My parents' attorney sent a formal request proposing mediation. Not corporate. Family. Off the record. Lauren raised an eyebrow when she read it. They want forgiveness, she said, without accountability. Then we decline, I replied. She smiled slightly. Good. 2 days later, Northridge Capital requested a private call. Not about governance. About intent. Are you still open to strategic options? Jonathan Hale asked. I'm open to growth, I said. Not coercion. He paused. Understood. The subtext was clear. Heliox wasn't the problem. The instability around it was. That night, Rosa came to my apartment again. No food this time. No pretense. I need you to listen, she said. I did. We didn't mean to hurt you, she said. We were afraid. Of what? I asked. She hesitated. Of losing relevance. That was the first honest thing she'd said in weeks. You raised a daughter who didn't need you the way you expected, I said. That scared you. Her shoulders sagged. You don't have to destroy us, she said. I'm not, I replied. I'm not intervening. She looked at me, confused. You're letting consequences exist, I continued. That's different. She left quietly. The pressure intensified anyway. Articles appeared. Speculation about Heliox's leadership drama. Analysts asking pointed questions. Daniel's name surfaced more often than mine. That was telling. Lauren forwarded me an email late Friday night. Daniel's lender is requesting updated disclosures. They're nervous. I smiled faintly. If you're still listening to this, if you've ever watched people panic only when their leverage disappears, pause for a second. Like, subscribe, comment if you've been asked to sacrifice yourself so others wouldn't feel the cost of their choices. Because this is where most people cave. I didn't. The following Monday, Daniel's company announced layoffs. Quietly, strategically. Miguel called that afternoon. Elena, he said, voice strained. This has gone far enough. No, I replied. It's just become visible. You're punishing us, he said. I'm not protecting you, I corrected. Silence. What do you want? He asked, finally. I thought about it. I want Heliox untouched, I said. I want no more interference. And I want you to stop positioning me as your exit. That's it? He asked. That's everything, I replied. The call ended unresolved. By the end of the week, Daniel's bridge loan terms tightened. By the end of the month, my parents' collateral was under review. And Heliox? Heliox signed 2 new contracts worth $87 million combined. The irony wasn't lost on me. They thought removing me would stabilize the company. All it did was expose who had been destabilizing it all along. And now, the window they'd counted on was closing slowly. I didn't push it. I let time do what it does best. Reveal who planned poorly. Pressure doesn't announce itself when it shifts. It shows up as small interruptions, delayed responses, people choosing words more carefully than they used to. By the second week of October, Daniel stopped texting entirely. That was the first real sign. Instead, his attorney reached out. Michael Arden, corporate restructuring specialist, Chicago-based. The email was clinical and brief, requesting a conversation to clarify exposure related to recent governance events. Lauren Weiss read it once and handed it back to me. "They're bleeding," she said, "and they want you to cauterize." "I'm not a medic," I replied. "No," she agreed. "You're the variable they miscalculated." At Heliox, the board settled into a new rhythm. No drama, no theatrics. Decisions moved forward. I reinstated weekly executive reviews, hired an external governance auditor to clean up optics. It wasn't performative. It was protective. I wasn't going to win this fight and leave the door unlocked. On Wednesday, Elliot Marsh, the board chair, asked to speak privately after our standing call. "Are you okay?" he asked. "Yes," I said. He nodded. "That's not what I meant." I understood. "They underestimated you," he said carefully. "But they also underestimated the board's tolerance for chaos." "I didn't invite chaos," I replied. "I survived it." He held my gaze. "Just make sure it doesn't become personal." "It already was," I said. "Now it's procedural." That night, I received a message from someone I hadn't heard from in years. Isabel Moreno, my aunt, my mother's older sister, the one who left early, married quietly, and never asked permission. She wanted to meet. We chose a quiet restaurant near Zilker Park, neutral territory. Isabel looked exactly the same. Sharp eyes, minimal jewelry. The kind of woman who paid attention when others looked away. "I warned your mother," she said after we sat. "Years ago." "About what?" I asked. "About mistaking control for care," she replied. I sipped water. "They always said you were difficult," Isabel continued. "Independent, unmanageable." I smiled faintly. "That tracks." She leaned in slightly. "Your father has been leveraging Daniel since he was 23, quietly, positioning him as an extension." That explained more than it should have. "They thought Heliox would be the final consolidation," she said. "One family asset, one narrative." "And me?" I asked. Isabel didn't hesitate. "Collateral." The word didn't hurt. It clarified. "They never planned to take it all from you," she added. "Just enough to control the exit." I nodded. "That's worse." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand once. No pity, no apology. "You're not wrong," she said. "You're just earlier than they expected." The next escalation came from the market. A rumor surfaced Friday afternoon. Anonymous sources suggesting Heliox leadership instability could delay long-term contracts. The story didn't gain traction, but it was planted carefully. Lauren called within minutes. "That came from inside Daniel's camp," she said. "They're trying to spook buyers." "Let them," I replied. She paused. "You're sure?" "Yes," I said. "Fear reveals desperation," we countered quietly. Investor briefings, transparent metrics, public reaffirmation from Northridge. Nothing flashy. By Monday, the rumor died. Daniel's credit didn't. His primary lender issued a notice of default risk, citing adverse governance developments. Miguel called that evening. "Elena," he said, voice hoarse, "this is destroying him." I stayed silent. "He's your brother," Miguel pressed. "He chose to be your proxy," I replied. "That doesn't mean he deserves this," he said. "It means he accepted the risk," I said calmly. Miguel exhaled sharply. "You always did this. You made things cold." "No," I said. "I made them clear." The call ended abruptly. The following day, Rosa sent a message. Not asking, not pleading, just a sentence. I should have stopped this earlier. I read it once and archived it. Not because it wasn't true, because it was late. At Heliox, Aaron Feld, the CFO, came into my office with a document. "They're asking again," he said. "Daniel wants access to internal forecasts." "For what purpose?" I asked. He hesitated. "To renegotiate." "With whom?" I asked. "His lenders," Aaron admitted. I shook my head. "Denied." "That will accelerate." "I know," I said, "and it's not my responsibility." Aaron nodded slowly. "Understood." That night, Lauren sent me a draft of a possible settlement proposal Daniel's team was circulating quietly. In exchange for public support of a strategic sale, Daniel would unwind his involvement, restore shares, and shield my parents from personal exposure. I closed the file. "They still think this is transactional," I said. Lauren leaned back. Do you want it to be? I thought about it. No, I said. I want it to be corrective. She smiled. Then we wait. Waiting didn't mean doing nothing. We tightened governance, filed supplemental disclosures, documented interference attempts. Everything was recorded. Clean, boring, unavoidable. By the end of the month, Daniel's company announced a restructuring. Smaller, less ambitious, a quiet retreat. Miguel stopped calling. Rosa sent one more message. I miss my daughter. I didn't respond because I wasn't lost. I was standing exactly where I'd always been. They just hadn't been looking. And now, the space they tried to occupy was closing. Not with a slam, with a lock. The next chapter wouldn't be about pressure. It would be about fallout. And who chose to stand where when the ground finally settled. Fallout doesn't arrive all at once. It arrives in invoices, revised forecasts, and the sudden absence of favors that once seemed automatic. The first invoice came from Daniel's lender, not to me, to Heliox. It was labeled an inquiry, not a demand. A request for confirmation that Heliox had no intention of providing financial support, guarantees, or forward-looking assurances to any cruise-affiliated entities. I forwarded it to Lauren Weiss. She replied with one word: decline. We did. Formally, publicly, with language that couldn't be misread. That afternoon, Northridge Capital asked for a check-in. Not urgent, not concerned, curious. Your family situation appears active, Jonathan Hale said carefully. It's contained, I replied, and separate from operations. He paused. We believe you. That was the line that mattered. By Friday, Daniel's restructuring hit the trades. Buried. No headlines. Just enough for the right people to notice. The tone wasn't sympathetic. It was clinical. Over-leveraged. Misaligned incentives. Leadership transition. The same phrases he'd once used about me. Miguel showed up at headquarters that evening. No call. No warning. Security hesitated, then called upstairs. He says he needs 5 minutes, the guard said. He looks different. I told them to let him up. Miguel stood in my doorway, older than he'd looked a month earlier. Not weaker, reduced. The confidence he'd always worn like armor now sat somewhere behind his eyes, unused. I won't stay, he said. You're already here, I replied. He didn't sit. I misjudged, he said. Not the company. You. I waited. I thought you'd negotiate, he continued. Compromise. Trade. I did, I said. Years ago, when you didn't listen. He nodded slowly. Daniel is in trouble, he said. I know, I replied. And your mother? He stopped himself. She's blaming herself. I felt nothing spike. No satisfaction. No relief. That's not my work, I said. That's reflection. Miguel looked at the skyline through the window. You've always been like this, he said quietly. When things go wrong, you don't scramble. You organize. I had to, I said. No one else did. He turned back to me. What do you want now? He asked. I answered without hesitation. I want distance, I said. And I want Heliox untouched. No calls to investors, no back channels, no positioning. And Daniel? He asked. I met his eyes. Daniel will live with the risks he accepted, I said. Like an adult. Miguel nodded once. Fair. He left without asking for anything else. That weekend, Rosa Delgado sent an email. Not a message, not a plea. An email. Subject, boundaries. She wrote 3 paragraphs. No justifications, no history. Just an acknowledgement that she had tried to smooth things that should have been confronted. That she had mistaken unity for silence. That she would step back. I replied with one sentence. Thank you for respecting that. Monday morning, Heliox announced a new partnership. Mid-8 figures. Strategic. Quietly validating. The market responded. Daniel's lenders did not. By midweek, Michael Arden, Daniel's attorney, requested a formal conversation. Lauren and I took the call together. Daniel is prepared to unwind his remaining Heliox exposure, Arden said. He wants a clean break. On what terms? Lauren asked. Arden cleared his throat. He's asking for a public statement of goodwill, acknowledging that governance disputes are resolved. I laughed once. Not loud, not cruel. No, I said. We don't issue character references. Silence. What does your client want in exchange? Lauren asked. To limit reputational damage, Arden replied. Lauren smiled thinly. Then your client should stop creating it. The call ended shortly after. That night, Daniel texted me directly for the first time in weeks. You won. What more do you want? I read it twice, then typed back. I want you to stop calling this a game. No response. The following Friday, Heliox's board approved a long-term governance amendment. Founder protection strengthened. Emergency authority clarified. No loopholes. Elliot Marsh called me afterward. You've changed the company, he said. No, I replied. I made it harder to misuse. He paused. What about your family? I stopped confusing proximity with access, I said. He understood. The final confirmation came quietly. Daniel's bridge loan converted. Assets transferred. Control diluted. Not destroyed, just reduced to reality. No one announced it. No one needed to. I went for a run that evening along the trail by the lake. The air was sharp, clean, my breath steady. I thought about how many years I'd spent anticipating someone else's reaction before making my own decisions. How often I'd softened edges to keep peace that was never mine to begin with. That habit was gone now, not replaced by anger, by choice. The next chapter wouldn't be about confrontation. It would be about what remains after leverage disappears, and who you are when no one can pressure you anymore. When leverage disappears, people stop pretending. The requests became smaller after that, less ambitious, less dressed up. A call to check in. An email asking for clarification that didn't really need it. The kind of communication that exists only to test whether the door is still unlocked. It wasn't. At Heliox, the work deepened. Not louder, deeper. We finalized a multi-year infrastructure contract with Southeastern Gridworks, a deal that had been circling for months. The signing happened without ceremony in a small conference room with 2 attorneys, a notary, and a sense of inevitability. No press, no celebration, just execution. That was the difference now. Things happened because they were ready, not because someone needed proof. On Tuesday, Lauren Weiss sent me a memo marked "For awareness only." Daniel's remaining Heliox-linked obligations had been fully disclosed to his lenders. No more ambiguity, no more shadow leverage. Translation? Lauren wrote. They can't imply you're backing anymore. Good. That afternoon, my mother called. I let it ring twice, then answered. Elena, Rosa Delgado said. Her voice sounded steadier than it had weeks earlier. Not calm, resolved. I wanted to tell you something before you hear it elsewhere. I leaned back in my chair. Go ahead. I'm stepping away from your father's advisory role, she said. And from Daniel's. I waited. I've spent too long smoothing things that should have been stopped, she continued. I won't do that anymore. That was as close to an apology as she could give without collapsing her own self-image. I hear you, I said. She hesitated. That's all? That's enough, I replied. We hung up without ceremony. Later that evening, Isabel Moreno texted me a photo. A younger version of us at a family barbecue years ago. Daniel in the foreground, loud, gesturing. Me in the background, holding a plate, half turned away. You always saw the exit, she wrote. I stared at the image longer than I expected. I had. I just hadn't used it. The next escalation didn't come from my family. It came from the market. A competitor filed a vague complaint with a regulator, questioning Heliox's governance stability during the attempted transition. It was transparent, tactical. The kind of move you make when you can't win on product. Priya Nandakumar flagged it immediately. We can respond, she said. Or we can let the filings speak. Let them speak, I replied. We submitted documentation, timelines, board votes, restored authority, everything clean, boring, unassailable. 2 days later, the inquiry was dismissed without comment. Daniel called that night. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. I'm not asking for help, he said. I'm asking for perspective. I listened once, then archived it. Perspective was a luxury he'd had for years. I wasn't responsible for providing it now. On Friday, Elliot Marsh invited me to dinner. Not business, just conversation. We met at a quiet place on the east side. No suits, no agendas. You know, he said midway through the meal, I've watched a lot of founders lose their companies. Most of them don't see it coming. I did, I replied. He nodded. That's why this ended differently. I didn't correct him. It hadn't ended. It had stabilized. You also changed something else, Elliot added. You showed the board that family risk is still risk. That wasn't my intention, I said. It doesn't have to be, he replied. Impact doesn't require motive. That night, I walked home instead of calling a car. The city felt familiar again. Not charged, not watchful, just present. I realized then that I hadn't checked my phone in hours. No vigilance, no scanning for damage. That absence felt like space. The following week, Daniel's company announced a strategic pause on expansion. Language carefully chosen. No mention of causes. Everyone who mattered knew. Miguel stopped reaching out entirely. Rosa sent one final email. I'm learning how to sit with the discomfort I used to hand to you. I didn't reply. Not because it wasn't meaningful. Because some realizations don't require witnesses. At Heliox, we closed the quarter strong. Revenue up, attrition down, morale steady. The board approved a long-term incentive plan tied to performance, not optics. I signed it without hesitation. On a quiet Sunday afternoon, I sat on my balcony, overlooking the water, and let myself think about what had changed. I hadn't become harder. I'd become less available to distortion. There was a difference. People confuse boundaries with punishment. They aren't the same. Boundaries don't retaliate. They simply stop the bleed. The last message came late that night, from Daniel. I don't know who I am without this fight. I typed a response, deleted it, typed again, deleted that too. Then I sent one line. You'll find out. And I meant it. Because this chapter wasn't about winning. It was about standing still long enough for everything false to fall away. The next chapter wouldn't be quiet. It would be definitive. Not because I planned it that way, but because once the ground settles, the truth has nowhere left to hide. Definitive moments don't announce themselves. They arrive wrapped in procedure. The notice came on a Tuesday morning, delivered by email, and followed by a phone call that didn't ask permission. Northridge Capital requested a formal update session with Heliox leadership and legal present. Not an emergency, not a crisis. A recalibration. That word mattered. Lauren Weiss joined from New York. Priyananda Kumar sat to my right. Aaron Feld, our CFO, dialed in from the finance floor. The agenda was short: governance stability, related party risk, forward posture. Jonathan Hale from Northridge didn't waste time. We're comfortable with Heliox's operations, he said. What we're not comfortable with is residual influence. He didn't say family. He didn't need to. Lauren answered first. There is no residual influence. We've documented separation, disclosure, and enforcement. Jonathan nodded. We've seen it. We're asking about durability. That was the real question. Not what had happened, but whether it could happen again. I leaned forward. Heliox's durability doesn't depend on who I'm related to, I said. It depends on structures we've reinforced and the behavior we no longer tolerate. Silence. Consideration. We'd like that reflected formally, Jonathan said, in a policy. We drafted it that afternoon. A related party firewall. Mandatory disclosure. Automatic recusal. Independent review triggers. No exceptions for proximity, history, or pressure. Clean. Clear. Uncomfortable for the wrong reasons. The board approved it, unanimously. By Thursday, the policy was public. That's when Daniel's lender called again. Not to negotiate, to notify. They were accelerating repayment timelines. Lauren's phone lit up first, then mine. This isn't coming from us, Lauren said before I could ask. But they'll try to frame it that way. I know, I replied. Miguel called that evening. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. This is collapsing, he said. You don't have to like us, but you don't have to destroy us either. I listened once, then stopped. The collapse wasn't caused by distance. It was caused by exposure. On Friday, Daniel sent a message through Michael Arden, his attorney. Formal, polite, stripped of emotion. Daniel is prepared to sign a binding acknowledgement of sole responsibility for all leveraged decisions and releases Heliox from any implied support, past or future. Lauren looked at me. This is what accountability looks like. Send it, I said. The acknowledgement was signed within 24 hours. No ceremony, no reconciliation, just a document that told the truth plainly. That Saturday, Heliox hosted an internal town hall. No questions screened, no script. I stood in front of 300 employees and said exactly one thing that mattered. No one gets to borrow this company's future without consent. There was no applause, just nods. That was enough. If you're still here, if you've ever watched someone try to hand you the bill for their choices, take a second. Like this. Subscribe. Say it out loud in the comments if you've ever been told to keep the peace while someone else kept the power. The aftermath moved quickly. Daniel's company announced asset sales. Miguel stepped down from 2 advisory boards. Rosa withdrew from public-facing roles entirely. None of it was dramatic. None of it needed to be. On Monday, Isabel Moreno called. "They're quieter," she said. "Not reflective. Quieter." "That's the first stage," I replied. "And you?" she asked. I thought about it. "I'm lighter," I said. "Not relieved. Lighter." She smiled through the phone. That lasts. At Heliox, momentum returned to what it had always been. Work. We closed another contract, promoted 2 directors, launched a pilot in a new region. The board authorized a long-term capital plan that didn't require urgency. Urgency had been the weapon. We took it away. Daniel called one last time late that week. I answered. "I'm not asking you to fix anything," he said. "I just want to know if you hate me." I paused. "No," I said. "I stopped organizing my life around you." Silence. "That feels like hate," he said. "It's not," I replied. "It's independence." He didn't argue. After we hung up, I realized something else had ended. Not the conflict, the expectation. The expectation that I would cushion outcomes, translate consequences, make space for other people's discomfort. That role was gone. By the end of the week, the market noticed Heliox's steadiness. Analysts stopped asking about governance. They asked about growth. That's how you know something is over, when curiosity moves on. I spent Sunday morning alone, walking the trail by the lake, watching runners pass with headphones in, lives moving forward without commentary. I thought about the boardroom chair my father took, how symbolic it had seemed at the time. It wasn't symbolic. It was instructive. It taught me exactly what happens when you leave a door unlocked long enough for someone else to mistake it for theirs. That door was closed now. Not slammed, not barricaded. Closed. The final chapter wouldn't be loud. It would be the kind of ending that only feels anticlimactic if you confuse peace with boredom. I didn't. Because peace, earned properly, is anything but dull. It's decisive. And it was finally mine. The quiet after a conflict is rarely empty. It's full of assessments, people recalculating where they stand, what they assumed, what they no longer can. I felt it everywhere that week. In meetings that ended faster than usual, in emails that chose safer language, in pauses where certainty used to be. Heliox had entered a different phase, not growth, control. On Monday morning, Priya Nandakumar came into my office with a thin folder. No urgency in her stride. That was intentional. "This came through the regulator's office late Friday," she said. "Not an inquiry, a notice." I opened the folder. A scheduled review, routine on paper. But the timing was precise. Triggered by a third-party submission. Daniel again, I thought. Or Miguel. Or someone adjacent trying one last angle. "Who initiated it?" I asked. Priya shook her head. Anonymous, but informed. Of course it was. The review would examine governance continuity during the attempted transition. No accusations. No implications. Just documentation. "We're fine," Priya said. "But it will reopen the timeline." "I'm not afraid of the timeline," I replied. "I know," she said. "I just want you to be prepared for the optics." The optics had never favored me. I'd learned to work without them. That afternoon, Lauren Weiss called. "I heard," she said. "You would," I replied. "They're hoping fatigue will make you concede narrative," she said. "Don't." "I won't," I said. She paused. "There's one more thing." I waited. "Daniel's counsel reached out again," she continued. "Not for negotiation. For guidance." That was new. "About what?" I asked. "About how to unwind his remaining exposure, without triggering additional scrutiny, Lauren said. He wants to exit quietly. I leaned back. And? I asked. And that's not your responsibility, she said. But your silence will shape how this ends. Silence again. It kept coming back as a theme. Let him unwind, I said. No commentary. Lauren exhaled. That will frustrate him. Good, I replied. Frustration isn't harm. By midweek, the review began. 2 regulators, 1 auditor. Neutral, efficient. They asked for records, emails, board minutes. Lauren and Priya handled everything. I answered questions when asked, precisely, without elaboration. One of the regulators, Caleb Morris, looked at me carefully at the end of the second day. You remained operationally consistent throughout the transition, he said. Yes, I replied. Most founders don't, he said. Most founders aren't removed by family, I answered. He nodded once. No pity, just acknowledgement. That night, Rosa emailed again. I debated not opening it, but I did. I'm learning what it means to let my children be separate adults. I didn't know how before. I didn't reply. Not because it wasn't progress, because it wasn't a conversation I was willing to have yet. On Thursday, Daniel sent a message. Short. Direct. They're asking me to step down from my board seat. I stared at the screen. Not my board. His. His final layer of authority dissolving. I typed back 1 sentence. That's between you and them. No anger, no satisfaction, just truth. Friday brought the unexpected. An acquisition inquiry. Not a bid. A signal. A global infrastructure firm requesting preliminary discussions. Long horizon, minority stake. Founder retention required. I read the email twice. This was the kind of opportunity Miguel had always chased. The kind Daniel had tried to force. Now it was arriving on my terms. I forwarded it to the board with 1 line. For consideration, no urgency. The response came quickly. Elliot Marsh called. This is exactly the kind of partner you said you wanted, he said. Yes, I replied. And exactly why we waited. We scheduled nothing. Just acknowledged the door. That night, I sat alone on my balcony again. Same view, same water. Different weight in my chest. Not lighter. Settled. I thought about how often people assume revenge is an action. A moment. A scene. It isn't. Revenge, the kind that lasts, is structural. It's removing access, ending dependency, letting people face the systems they tried to manipulate without you cushioning the fall. My family had always believed proximity gave them leverage. They were wrong. Leverage only exists where consent does. And mine had been withdrawn. The regulator's review concluded the following Monday. No findings, no notes, no follow-up, just a closure letter. That afternoon, Daniel called. I answered. I'm stepping down, he said. From everything. I didn't respond immediately. They want a statement, he continued. I won't mention you. That's appropriate, I said. He hesitated. Do you think we'll ever talk like siblings again? I considered the question. I think we'll talk like adults, I said. If we do. Silence. That's not the same, he said. No, I replied. It's healthier. After we hung up, I realized something else. I wasn't waiting for the next hit. The cycle had broken. The next chapter wouldn't be about defense. It would be about choice, and what I decided to build now that no one else could claim ownership of the outcome. Choice feels quiet when you're finally allowed to make it. Not because it lacks weight, but because no one is shouting over it anymore. The week after the regulator closed the review, Heliox moved forward, as if a storm had passed offshore without ever making landfall. Calendars filled with work that mattered. Decisions returned to normal scale. No one asked me how I was holding up. That, more than sympathy, told me everything I needed to know. I was no longer an exception. I was the standard again. On Wednesday morning, Elliot Marsh asked me to join him for a walk between meetings. No agenda, just air. You realize, he said after a few minutes, that most people don't survive what you did without losing either their company or their sense of self. I lost something, I said. What? He asked. The idea that blood equals alignment, I replied. He nodded. That's not a small thing. No, I said, but it was overdue. That afternoon, I declined the acquisition inquiry. Not because it wasn't attractive, because it arrived too early for what I wanted next. I didn't want an exit. I wanted authorship. I spent the rest of the week with my leadership team, not in strategy sessions, but in one-on-ones, listening, adjusting, clarifying where authority lived and why. I told them exactly one thing that mattered. No one here owes me loyalty. We owe the work integrity. They understood. Friday evening, Lauren Weiss called. "This is the part where people usually disappear," she said. "Lawyers, advisors. Crisis resolved." "You're not disappearing," I replied. "No," she said. "I'm transitioning." "To what?" I asked. "To advisor," she said. "Not defender. You don't need one anymore." I smiled. "Thank you. You did the hardest part," she added. "You didn't let the fight define the future." After we hung up, I sat in my office longer than usual. The building was quiet, the city below dimming into evening. For the first time since this began, I let myself replay the moment my father sat in my chair. Not with anger, with distance. He hadn't taken it because he believed it was his. He'd taken it because he'd never believed it was mine. That distinction mattered. The following Monday, my mother requested a meeting. Not at my apartment, not at the office. Neutral ground. A small cafe neither of us frequented. Rosa Delgado arrived early. No makeup, no armor. "I'm not here to ask you to fix anything," she said once we sat. "Good," I replied. "I'm here to tell you I see what I didn't before," she continued, "and that I'm learning to live with the consequences." I studied her face. She looked older, more real. "I don't need apologies," I said. "I need consistency." She nodded. "You'll get it." We spoke for 30 minutes. About nothing urgent, nothing historical, just where things stood. When we stood to leave, she touched my hand lightly. "I don't know how to be your mother without controlling you," she said. "You don't have to," I replied. "Just don't undermine me." She smiled, sad but genuine. "I can do that." Daniel didn't reach out again. I heard about him through Isabel, through indirect updates that no longer required my response. He was rebuilding. Slowly. Smaller. Without shortcuts. That was his work. At Heliox, I announced a new internal initiative. Founder protections, expanded into leadership protections, clear succession protocols, no ambiguity about authority. Not because I planned to leave, because no one should have to fight like that again. The board approved it, unanimously. That night, I slept without checking my phone. No scanning, no anticipate, just rest. On Sunday, I went to the lake alone. Watched families pass, couples, runners, people living in forward motion without knowing what it costs to get there. I didn't envy them. I understood them. The part of me that once thought survival required constant vigilance had finally stood down. Not because the world became safe, because I had. The final lesson arrived quietly, without confrontation or closure rituals. Power doesn't disappear when you stop fighting for it. It clarifies. And once clarified, it stops being something others can borrow. The last chapter wouldn't be about victory. It would be about what happens when you choose yourself without needing permission, and why that choice changes everything that follows. I didn't mark the ending with an announcement. No press release, no family gathering, no symbolic gesture designed for witnesses. The ending arrived the morning I realized I no longer rehearsed conversations that might never happen. That was how I knew it was done. Heliox entered the new year steady, not explosive, not desperate. Predictable in the way serious companies are predictable. Revenue tracked, teams executed. The board stopped asking about contingency plans and started asking about 5-year horizons. That shift mattered more than any apology. I finalized a long-term governance framework that quarter. Founder authority codified. Emergency succession protocols clear. Independent oversight embedded early, not as a reaction. It wasn't about protecting me. It was about making sure no one ever confused access with entitlement again. When Elliot Marsh signed the final resolution, he looked up and said, "You've changed how this company defines risk." I nodded. Risk isn't volatility, it's silence. He understood. My father never asked to meet again. I heard through Isabel that Miguel Cruz had taken a consulting role overseas. Temporary, face-saving. A place where no one knew the story and no one expected explanations. That was his choice. My mother and I spoke occasionally. Brief calls, neutral ground. She didn't give advice anymore, didn't ask questions designed to guide my answers. She listened. That was enough. Daniel sent one final message months later, not asking, not blaming, just a sentence. I'm learning how to build without shortcuts. I read it. Didn't reply. Some statements don't require acknowledgement to be true. The billion-dollar company people like to reference in headlines stopped feeling like armor. It became what it always should have been: a tool, a responsibility, a platform built on decisions I could stand behind without explaining myself to anyone who hadn't earned context. On a quiet Friday evening, I stayed late at the office. Not working, just sitting, watching the city lights come on one by one. I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who believed competence would be enough, that excellence would protect her from being minimized by the people who shared her last name. She wasn't wrong. She was just early. Family betrayal doesn't always come as cruelty. Sometimes it comes as confidence, as assumption, as people deciding what you should do with what you built because they were there before the value was obvious. Revenge doesn't have to look like punishment. Mine didn't. Mine looked like refusing to save people from the outcomes of choices they made while underestimating me. It looked like documentation instead of confrontation, distance instead of destruction, and clarity instead of rage. The day Heliox crossed its next valuation milestone, no one from my family called. That told me everything. I celebrated quietly. Dinner with friends who knew me now, not then. People who didn't need a resume to respect my presence. Later that night, alone again, I realized the most dangerous thing I'd done wasn't fighting back. It was stopping the performance. No more softening language. No more shrinking success to avoid tension. No more managing other people's emotions so they wouldn't feel threatened by my stability. That habit had been the real inheritance, and I'd finally declined it. If you're listening to this and it feels familiar, if you've ever been positioned as the reasonable one so others could be reckless, pause here. Like this story. Subscribe if you want more like it. And if you're willing, leave a comment about the moment you stopped cushioning someone else's choices at your own expense. Because here's the truth no one tells you early enough. Being calm doesn't mean being available. Being capable doesn't mean being responsible for everyone else. And being family doesn't entitle anyone to what you built. I didn't lose my family. I lost the version of myself that thought survival required permission. And that was the most profitable decision I ever made. Not financially, personally. So did I. And this time, nothing was built on borrowed authority.